Right then, folks. So it's another one of these using Perplexity, the large language model, to sort of structure my thoughts in a way which is easy. I have to put less effort in. Right then, so let's have some context about any. So I have this big. I've done a video where I go over and I make a big case for how any is empirical because of the in hindsight. So if you see that video, that's where I go into quite a lot of depth about it, and I do subfunctions as well. And I give the example of the infinite improbability drive and Douglas Adams talking about how he created it. So yeah, so that's super, well, for me, super in depth. And then, but just to get our bearings. So this is an old graphic. It might even be 2015. So let's concentrate on these three here. So what you can do with the irrational functions is define and or describe those in comparison with the other functions. So for example, you have, let's just concentrate on any, how any is different from the other ones. So you got that SE focus. When I was talking about artisans last time, and there's a lot of that focus in the here and now on what is appropriate, immersed in the present context. And any can be a little bit too general. And how does any allergic come across? So there's two people I've sort of studied quite a bit of. More so John Grinder, the co-founder of NLP, as in neuro-linguistic programming, not natural language programming, which is more the rage now. And with him, you get a smart, high-achieving ISTP who's really going into his thought process, and you understand why he doesn't like any. And so in his meta model, he talks about, he says one of the meta model violations is complex equivalence, which is this is that. So he doesn't like A equals B. He wants to keep them separate because if you look at the commonalities only, then you can lose some of the specifics, and some of those specifics may be just as important than the commonalities. Whereas the NE person is finding the commonalities to something that he or she knows in order to get some insight into the new thing. Right. And then, so there's a difference there between SE and NE. There's a difference between NE and NI in terms of breadth versus depth. The NJs might say that we NPs are a mile wide and an inch deep. And then the difference with SI and NE is, I suppose there's two kinds of risks. There are concrete risks, more physical risks, and there are more sort of NE risks, such as let's do a dramedy with science fiction and stuff in and all of that, and doing something new and that. And so there is a theme of the new with NE and SE versus SI, which is more conservative. So there's sort of abstract risks with NE and more concrete risks with SE, more sort of sensory kind of risk. But the NE risk, it's like, oh, this possibility. Right. Yeah. I'm going to do a bit on, and before I get back to what I should be doing, which is that one, I'm going to talk a bit about how guardians use NE. And this is all about consistency. Now, I'm just going to move myself a bit. I'm not using the pro scenes, and so I would crop it if it was all the same, but all different aspect ratios. Right, so the guardians use an NE. And again, it's this associative speech in Kersey's final book. where he's talking about guardians will go from subject to subject to subject. And so I'm looking at it and I'm going, and again, using my cross contextual thinking, it's just, oh, that's like what MPs do. But we MPs are tangenting between ideas, more tangenting between abstractions. The guardians are tangenting between concrete things. And usually those concrete things are in the memory. And so it's accessing memory. But then also, the MPs are also accessing memory because these abstractions are not in the present. You have to draw on those. So again, and also guardians using any to serve the guardian temperament. So again, especially FI will, there's guardian FI, artisan FI, idealist FI. And so, and it's the same as like the content, and I'm not the first person to think of this. This is Linda Barron's. Like it's the functions are used in the context of the temperament. Looking to a similar task in the past, and the method that worked for that task. And the guardians look to the past because they're looking for safety in what worked. And what worked is in the past. So the similarity between the current task and the past one has been seen. I think any is involved in that because I think any is involved in the cross-contextual thinking. Because as Dario says, MP is the best at it, and I see evidence for that outside of what Dario has said. Extra points for adapting the method to the current task. Yeah. You still have that guardian preference of going to what has worked, and what has worked is in the past. And so you have SI drawing on memory. Now, this is frequently where people in MBTI, especially who are new to it, can then just reduce that to then saying SI is memory. And John Gridley could say, I told you, complex equivalence. They're not good. Whereas it's nuance. SI draws on memory because SI is looking to reduce risk. And again, what worked is in the past. Therefore, you need memory to access it. So that's that part of NE. Now I'm going to do the part about it being empirical. But I'm just going to do a little bit of right about how is it empirical. Right, I'm just going to do a little bit on it being empirical, and then I'll get to the other one. Yeah. So the context of this is socionics. Information socionics has a big problem. It cannot understand verting. And I'll tell you why. This is because in Jung's definitions of the functions, when a function is extroverted, but the problem with that is a meta violation because you turn in a process and you turn it into an abstract noun, and not only that, you're saying it happened in the past, whereas functions are dynamic. So we can say when a function is extraverting. So, for example, if you are putting your attention in the moment outside of yourself, that is a verb, that is a mental verb, and you are extroverting your sensory instincting. But in terms of if you are extroverting, then that is external. So by definition, the definition of extroverting outside of socionics is being external. The definition of introverting is being internal. How do we get there? If you're extroverting, you are being outward. What is outward is external. Using these English words just makes it a lot clearer. So we go from extroverting to outwarding. We go from introverting to inwarding. And because it is inward, it is subjective to you. And because it is outward, it is more external. But socionics cannot understand that because it has this asinine dichotomy of Sensing and thinking are external. So it's effectively saying that sensing and thinking are extroverted, are outward, and intuiting or feeling are inward, subjective. So what that means is that socionics cannot see a subjective side to sensing. It cannot account for qualia, look it up, and it cannot account for subjective thinking, which means that all language, this should not exist if socionics is right about thinking. You should not have to look up a word because it should be external. What I think and what I say should be identical. The meaning, the semantics. But it's not. These are signifiers. This is the empirical part. This lists the empirical part of thinking, at least thinking through language, the dictionary. But someone's full understanding doesn't get across. I'll also ask socionics modellators, why do you need to explain your system? Why do you need to explain your definitions? Because it doesn't transfer from your mind. Thinking is not completely external. And how are you going to get it external if you're not using language? Try to argue to a linguist or a semiotician that the signifier equals the signified. There are words which have different meanings in different languages. Right. So there is a subjective side to thinking. There's a subjective side to sensing. And in other videos, I've shown that, and also socionics would say that feeling and intuiting are completely internal. But there is an empirical side to feeling. People don't need a dictionary, most people, unless they have to have some kind of training in case of autism, or some people who are FE allergic, some certain INTJs. They don't need a dictionary of facial expressions. And Paul Ekman, who came up with the facial action coding system and was the consultant on Lie to Me, he looked at the affect display of a tribe that had no contact with anyone outside and had the same facial expressions. And he distinguished it from gestures, culturally specific gestures. But the facial expressions for disgust and happiness and all those emotions were the same. Whereas we don't have the same meanings for words. Whereas we don't need a language for affect display. Right, so you could say that is more empirical than language. So socionics would have us believe that language is external because it is thought, whereas feelings, at least that part which is conveyed by affect display, but language conveys thought, right? Affect display, the tone of voice, the facial expression, the posture, conveys feeling, whereas that's internal, but that's more empirical and more agreed upon by everyone around the world, whereas language isn't. So thought conveyed by language is external, but feelings conveyed by affect display is internal. Obviously, that is wrong. And for a lot of FE people, the world of feelings is a lot more real to them because they are introjecting the feelings. And it's like they feel impinged upon by other people's feelings, especially when it's INFJ. Because they really rather just like, and it's like, oh no, I feel this obligation to help these other people. The feelings are really, oh, you want me to counsel you again? I already have 19 other people to counsel. That's what can happen to INFJ. Especially if they're 4-wing-5, they just want to read their books, and it's like they feel this obligation to help people because they are introjecting other people's emotions, and there's a part of the brain to deal with that, sort of the mirror neurons and that lot, and the bit behind the left ear, if you're right-handed, that attend to social feedback, where they introject somebody else's feelings, and based on the affect display, really moved by it. It's like, oh, really moving. It's like if you see really good acting and it's like, oh, she's really feeling that, and you can take it in. Right, now it's about any. This is the hardest one to prove. that is external. And so that's what this is about. So we can say that certain parts related to any are, so for example, external stimuli. And when you're going through a product of any, you can sort of explain where it started from. So, for example, there was all that stuff with Douglas Adams over here and how he created the infinite improbability drive because he watched a judo program and he heard the principle use your opponent's weight against himself. Right. Can I go a bit more like that? Right, here we go. Just think about how to do this. If I go there, can I move that across? Oh. Right. External stimuli. So external. So again, puts into the object just as it takes out. Yeah. But you have to sort of prove it afterwards. You can sort of prove it afterwards. And again, these connections. Well, these are connections between things which are outside, either ideas, and you can describe the connection. How it's empirical, and then there's a bit more here, and then I'll go to the right. So this is, yeah. That's my point there. That it would be easier to convince um, a psychologist outside of typology that NE is real rather than NI. So the connection is frequently there in hindsight. It was just not recognized by many before then. Well, that's obvious. Why didn't someone come up with that before or see that before? So examples, features, a possibility successfully acted on, a connection seen after it has been pointed out. So this is a comedian. This is in a book, The New Comedy Writing Step by Step, book printed in the 90s. If carrots are so good for the eyes, how come I see so many dead rabbits on the highways? So connection. I'm not saying it's a good joke. In comparison, NI on its own, foretelling the future, could be seen as a lucky guess. NI is especially undercut by seers of the future frequently being hit and miss and not being able to stand up to scientific testing. But what are empirical are Kersey's NI-related intelligent roles of directed strategic coordination, NI&TE, and directed diplomatic mentoring, NI with FE. Although even there, NI is only inferred as the invisible hand guiding TE and FE respectively. In summary, I think it would be easier to convince a psychologist that NE is real than NI is real. It would also likely depend on his Jungian type. So if it's an ISTP psychologist and it's like, okay, I recognize it's real and I don't like it. Right, so let's go to those roles and then I'll go through the proper thing. Right, so some of these roles are more convincing than others. So for example, so these are the informing roles of designing theories and models. Designing theories, and this is a bit more expressive in that it's putting it into action. So this is why the former name. So the other sort of the predisposed role of the ENTP is the inventor, but really the predisposed role of the ENTP is the debate troll. But the high functioning ENTP, the extra high functioning ENTP, the inventor, because they have that sort of strong. They're strongest in the model. The second strongest outward function is TE after any. So theories and models, designers like Kersey coming up with his own system, Jung coming up with his own system, Behrens having her own thoughts, being a disciple of Kersey, but thinking, actually, I think I'm going to integrate this with functions. Victor Galenka coming up with his own system. So this construction with this subjective thinking and this cross-contextual aspect of NE, the perception of similarities. And I'll remind people that Aristotle is reported to have stated that the ability to create metaphors cannot be taught because it relies upon the ability of the perception of similarities. Now, so you have these sort of constructions, these TI constructions, again, constructions, abstract constructions, although, the INTPs can do some TE and do some practical in STEM. Right. So they're not all these philosophers such as Immanuel Kant. And yeah, and by the way, I was convinced by someone, by an INTP woman, that Wittgenstein ISTP. Right. So, and again, you can see here the relationships, seeing different points of view, maybe integrating, again, reconciling. I don't know about advocating coming from that, but that's sort of just looking at it as like, come on, look at all these ENFPs being social advocates. But it might not exactly be the role of mediator unless it's advocating in a way like bringing people together. Not quite mediation, but reconciling is coming from mediation. So there, it's like different viewpoints and bring it. That's sort of harder to see. Yeah, but now it's about getting to this point, the beginning. Maybe I should have led with this. Right, so cannot spell extroverting. And it's not even extroverted. It's like, what does that sound like? Oh, it was extroverted in the past. Well, that's not how the process is used. It's a dynamic mental process. It is a cognitive faculty. So it is, you are outwarding intuiting. It is a process, it is a mental verb. Your description of NE as being empirical in hindsight aligns well with its core characteristics as outlined by Carl Jung and modern typology. Here's a structured breakdown of your argument. Carl Jung described extroverting as an orientation towards the external world, focusing on, do you see what I mean? How can socionics understand, information socionics that is, understand that when it defines sensing and thinking as external? Whereas for us, everybody else, extroverting is external. Right. While he used the term objective, your interpretation of it as empirical fits well, because he was always talking about the object. So what we could say by the object is the percept, the object of perception, because sound is not an object. Your interpretation of it as empirical fits well because extraverting deals with observable phenomena. Not necessarily observable. Sound is not observable. Not unless you're looking at the speaker move. We could say empirical phenomena. Yeah. Any is focused on possibilities. How can we, what about that statement there? Can we falsify that? Well, what we can do is we can look at informing idealists, informing rationals. We can see if they do it. We can look at people with NP, go through people with a guided MBTI step 2, where there's much more nuance to it, and we can say, does this person with MP preferences have a focus on possibilities? And then you might say, yeah, but Ben, those questions are in the actual MBTI about, do you focus on possibilities? So that's sort of like circular reasoning a bit, but we can say there's a way of getting there without you directly using functions. So it all comes together because socionics does not have an inventory, and the reason it doesn't have an inventory is because it doesn't understand JP. It cannot have JP questions. Right. The JP questions don't work in socionics. Okay, sidebar. So, for example, Haley on the channel, INTJ, very clear INTJ preferences, strong TE. The questions you would need to come up with for her to score as an irrational type would be very nuanced about an internal process, and they would not work for, say, a guardian to score as a J. And so you'd almost need different sets of questions for different sets of people. Whereas what MBTI does is it says, okay, we're focused on how someone is in the world. And so, and basically it's a proxy for conscientiousness in the big 5. And people are conscientious for two reasons, and you can nuance it. So people are conscientious for TE reasons. So an INTJ might turn up late because he doesn't care about, or she doesn't care about the other people saying, hey, you're late. Whereas the TE thing might be, I get my job done in the time. It's not my fault I'm more efficient than you. I can get the same work done to a higher standard in a short amount of time. What about my feelings? I'm INTJ, I don't care. Whereas, but you can see that the NTJs are, and especially INTJ, it's still structuring the world. It's conscientious through the TE filter. Then you can say the FJs are conscientious through the FE filter. Why you turn it up on time? Because I respect the other person's time and I don't want that person hanging around. So different kinds of organization in the world. And so and what MBTI should then say is, well, we shouldn't then call that judging and perceiving. We should make a clear distinction between rationality and irrationality and this sort of proxy of conscientiousness in the outside world. Right. Right then. And also, and they shouldn't use the term perceiver because these functions are not perception. Perception is related to thoughts. How do I know this? Look in a cognitive psychology book. A quarter of cognitive psychology is perception. And what is perception? It is percept recognition, not just object recognition. Oh, you recognize the song. Oh, you recognize the object. Oh, what does that do? Oh, I can't make sense of it. Perception is making sense of the sensory. You can say you're hearing someone from a distance and you're ear wigging. You're trying to hear what someone says. You're making sense of the sounds. It's like, oh, you don't quite catch every word. You're making sense of it. Percept recognition, depth recognition, making sense of the sensory. So it is related to thought. So it's his thought making sense of the sensory. Right. Any is focused on possibilities. And I'm doing a lot of this digression stuff, but it's still within the same topic of typology. Right. Right. Extraverting intuiting perceives patterns, connections, and opportunities in the external world. It is outwardly focused on what could be, drawing from external stimuli to generate ideas and possibilities. So the external stimuli. So again, if you Douglas Adams, he can say, well, I heard this, I saw this connection between A and B. And I saw, well, that's like this other thing. And you can discuss it. These possibilities are often seen abstract or hypothetical at first, but gain clarity in hindsight when they are realized or acted upon. This is where the empirical in hindsight idea fits perfectly. Thank you. Hindsight and any is nature. Right. Right then. Opportunities that are always there. Any users often see potential connections or opportunities that others miss until they are acted upon or realized. Yeah, once it becomes concrete, it's not unavoidable. In hindsight, these opportunities appear obvious. Well, yeah, because once it's been done, it is obvious. And when the NP explains, oh, how it was done, and it's like, yeah. So it's like A and B were obvious, and in hindsight, the connection between A and B, or the parallel between A and B, appear obvious. Right. In hindsight, they appear obvious as if they were empirically present. For example, many creative breakthroughs or innovations seem obvious once implemented, but because sometimes it's like, well, that could have been invented 200 years before, or why didn't the Romans invent the seed drill? And sometimes, yeah, many creative breakthroughs or innovatives seem obvious once implemented, but they required any's ability to connect disparate ideas to bring them into reality. Or the ideas behind percepts, or rather the abstractions behind percepts. Because what Douglas Adams did is he heard use your opponent's weight against himself as a judo principle, and he abstracted use the weight of the argument against itself. No. Use the weight of the problem against itself. So that's a higher level. That's chunking up from use the weight of the opponent against himself, and that the opponent is a subset of a problem. So you could say opponent is here, and a subset of this larger thing, which is a subset of problems. So use the weight of the problem against itself. Right. Role of action. Yes, role of action. Yeah. Extroverted intuition is not just about seeing possibilities, but also about acting on them. Once acted upon, these abstract possibilities become tangible and observable, reinforcing the idea that any operates in a way that feels empirical after the fact. And another way that any can be explained more easily is that, especially ENTPs, like I said, the debater, they're articulate. Most ENTPs are articulate. Your hindsight argument. Did I skip anything? Yeah, empirical after the fact. I wonder what that 2 and 3 is. Is it in there? Let's go back. Empirical after the fact. No. Hindsight arguments. Empirical. Number 2. What's number 2? Psychological junkie. Okay. That's probably D.A. Drenth. 10 signs you might be an extroverted intuitive. Right. Number 3. Oh, him. C.F. Joseph. Uses a lot of NLP and Linda Barron stuff and passes it off as his own. Allegedly. What is extroverted intuition? Right. Okay. Right. Hindsight argument. Hang on a minute. Yeah, that's the next one, isn't it? Right. Your hindsight argument. Right. Your observation that people often say, "Why didn't anyone think of this before?" directly reflects how NE works. NE uses perceived connections that seem abstract at first, but become clear in hindsight. Oh, there was that thing from Dario about the definition of creativity. It's a bit NE biased as well. Seeing connections that no one has seen before. And it was in a book by Raymond G. Frensham on screenwriting. Actually, there's a good checklist in there on creating characters. He has about 100 things to consider. Oh. Clear in hindsight. The realization of these possibilities makes them feel as though they were always present, even if they weren't immediate or obvious to others. This aligns with the idea that NE is outwardly focused on exploring external patterns and connections while relying on hindsight to validate its insight. Now, remember, socionics says that intuition is completely internal. So again, you can't, socionics model A is, you can't understand extroverting if you're going to hold to the internal-external dichotomy, because you can't understand introverting when you have internal. You cannot understand extroverting if you have external, when to you, external means thinking and sensing, and to you, internal means feeling and intuiting. Whereas to everybody else, and to Carl Jung, and this reflects life. There is an empirical side to feeling, affect display. There is a subjective side to feeling, as in you are not feeling directly what the other person is feeling. There is an empirical side to thinking. There is a subjective side to thinking. Especially when it's conveyed through language. There is an empirical side to SE. People look at the same object. There's a subjective side. Oh, that reminds me of this. Sentimental value and all of that. An empirical side to intuiting, which is what we've gone over. And then a subjective side to NI, which is like, that's weird. How did you get there, NJ? Especially INJ. INTJ, I don't care to explain. All right. I'm more intelligent than you anyway. Not smart enough to understand. All right, so stereotypical INTJ. All right. All right. Conclusion. Did I do all of the super functions? Feeling, sensing. Oh, the subjective side of sense. Also qualia. Intuiting. The thinking. So that like you say the especially STEM sciences that's a lot of that is empirical. Yeah. Where there's going to be a more subjective side to say I mean, psychology is just about gets in there as a science, uh, especially depending on methodology. There, extroverted intuition can indeed be described as empirical in hindsight because it identifies opportunities and connections in the external world that only become clear once acted upon or realized. I wouldn't say opportunities because opportunities can be more concrete, such as an artisan going, someone's left a wallet. All right. This perspective ties neatly into Jung's definition of extraverting as outwardly focused and objective, empirical, while also capturing Ennie's unique ability to make sense of abstract possibilities after the fact. Your connection between hindsight, clarity, and Ennie's function is a thoughtful and accurate interpretation of its nature. Now, it is biased, though, because when you ask these large language models, what personality type are you like? They'll say INTP or INTJ. Right then. So, there we go. Let me try and find that bit on creativity in the Raymond G. Frensham book. If the book is to hand. Oh, hang on a minute. I'm gonna get my I'm gonna split this. What kind of split left to right? I actually did it in an NE presentation with Victor Galenko. Right. Okay, so I need to go up. I think I did it in. Hang on a minute. So I need to go to. I'll have a look at this while I'm doing it. That's not right. Perplexity. There you go. Why didn't that change? Oh, you're going to need to do that again. It's not changed. Okay, so okay, get out of practice with this. Plus, I've used Google Hangouts and StreamYard a lot more. Oh, there it is. Are we based? Right, let's do it like that. Oh, it's not gone big. Why hasn't it gone big? Oh, hang on a minute. Okay, so more maximize. It's not maximized. Why isn't it maximized? It's a bit strange, this. Oh, I'll put myself on. Oh, is it going to go? Oh, it's gone weird. Right, so here we go. So I need to go typology. Okay, let's go Vanderhoop. Let's go up. And it's probably in the socionics folder, actually. Socionics is definitely part of my thinking. I've learned a lot from socionics. That's why I say after socionics. To prove that I've sort of moved on from it, but I have learned from it. I'm not discrediting it all. It's information socionics that is the problem. Victor Galenko is really bitter about information socionics because he's like, right, and he actually describes TI plus as rigid and or logic. Now, it still has the problem there of not making it subjective. So, how is logic introverted or extroverted? Is sort of independent of that. Logic can exist inside of a LIM. Okay, so theory. Okay, so I need to go to details view. Do we have functions? Functions and charges. There. I'll just get to my NE folder. Oh, I think I put it under I for the socionic symbol for I. Okay, so what am I going to do here? I'm going to close that. It's going to cause problems with whatever desktop manager I'm using. Not invite guest, it's share the screen. there. So I have to go scroll all the way down, put that there. First world problems. Share. Add to scene. Right. Right. So yeah, that's what we saw before. So this is going through. This should be all my slides, all my NE slides. Did this in 2015, or on my calendar, maybe towards the end of 2014, because start the year on March 1st. There you go. Right, solution to improbable. Use your opponent's weight against them. Use the weight of the problem against itself. Infinite improbability drive. Right, here we go. This is from Ray Frencham. Discovering hidden links or relationships between two unrelated things, ideas, stroke people, no one has seen before. The ability to see patterns and relationships in one situation and match those to many other seemingly very different situations, but where that concept still holds. It's a way with words, Dario. He's got a lot better. The Magic Diamond is well written. It's the best at this transcantational thing. Right. Right. This is my thing with Douglas Adams. If I'm not going to read this through, just pause it. There you go. That's his interview about how he came up with the idea. Yeah. Oh, how do I get that across? I'm not going to remove myself. Right. There you go. You read that. And there we go. And then they actually have the infinite improbability drive bit on here. And for you lucky people, buy the book. I'm going to say this is a review purpose. Yeah, it's good. That's my review. Therefore, I'm not in trouble. So there you go. There's the infinite improbability drive. Pause and read, please. And then here. Pause and read. Pause and read. Now, Douglas Adams doesn't stay at this level because you might think, oh, this is great. But, that's the height he reached. That was the highest he ever got. Right. 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 There we go. What's this? The shopping hour. Oh, done. That's been done. Anything else? Is there anything else in this? Oh, that's right. Yeah. That's just. Oh, you can see what it is. That's for somebody else. This might be from Andre on the channel. Yeah. There we go. Do what you can. I'll. Now I don't do the pips plans myself. I have my plus plans because if it's on an intellectual level, it's thinking. What's this? Did I get something wrong? This is old. 2014 stuff. Old school. I know that. 10th in deficit. As a child, I was hyperactive. Right. Might be more stuff from Andre. Yeah. What's this? Yeah, metaphor in Pat Patterson. Yeah. ISFP. Let's make that a bit better by. Right. These are Victor's ideas on. Yeah, but E7's a bit more EP because you can have SE E7 rather than just NE E7. Again, it's going to be more sensual with, although like do sensory stuff, EPs. Right, there we go. What's this? Right, okay, what was that? I think that was supposed to be shown. It's in the folder. Right. Yeah. That, I'm going to go back to remove myself. That is that.